Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Authentic Voice podcast. I'm Grace Johnston, and today I am delighted to introduce you to Ms. Kirsten Alberts from South Africa, who is a support and trauma counselor who helps her clients to break the patterns of narcissistic and emotional abuse. She lives in South Africa with her husband, daughter, and dogs. Welcome, Kirsten.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, we're going to have such a juicy, wonderful conversation today. And I know you are a subject matter expert on emotional trauma and dealing with narcissists. And so I'm so excited to jump into a conversation with you today.
Me too.
All right. So, Kirsten, tell us a little bit about kind of how you started doing this counseling work.
Okay, well, when I was studying criminology, there was a nonprofit organization that realized that their clients needed help through the court system. So they approached the criminology students because we basically knew the process. And then our job was basically to pitch up at court, get a list of court dates and courtrooms, pitch up at courts, and then just tell the victims of these crimes where to go, where to sit, things like that. And I mean, because it was harrowing, it really was. I mean, the lawyers are assigned by the state who weren't very happy about trying the cases, let alone winning any of them, not bringing much justice to victims. It's also a very dangerous place to be. If the offenders have not been actually processed yet, they're allowed free rein to walk around the building. They can even come and sit next to their own victims while she waits to give her testimony. And all that sort of came out was that they didn't just need support and counseling sort of because of the crimes or because of the way that they were victimized. They also needed sort of post counseling as well because of how they were treated then through the system, by the police, by their own families, things like that. And then it sort of came apparent that they needed like kind of second wave trauma counseling for not necessarily what happened to them, but from what happened afterwards. So I volunteered there until I graduated, and then I got to a diamond mining company, and then I did studies in criminal profiling and intelligence. And only after years and years and years of working there, when I realized my own family was abusive, that I sort of connected the dots between, treating trauma like a mental illness was actually not the way to go. Treat trauma as a crime because it is a crime. If it's a stranger, it's a case of it is a crime and there is justice and society calls out for it. And, there are repercussions and there's a lot of sympathy and empathy for the victim. When it's a family member, there's no such thing. And actually the victim is treated like the offender, and the victim is told to get over it or suck it up or be the bigger person. And there's zero justice whatsoever. I mean, the person's not even allowed to walk away from the family, let alone everything. And then the things that they face afterwards, the smear campaigns, the flying monkeys, all the sort of second wave trauma after that. And then realized, rather treat this kind of thing as a crime, using profiling and intelligence and all that kind of thing to treat that instead of, treating like a mental illness. These people are not sick. They've been victimized. And just because it's family, it doesn't make any difference. So I thought, okay, well, let's sort of do that. And then while I was at it, sort of mapped out my own recovery according to sort of criminal profiling. And then that's kind of how it started.
That is so fascinating. I feel like you've come into this in sort of a James Bond way, criminal profiling and all of this background that you have of helping trauma victims of a very different sort, right? Where you probably saw lots of physical abuse in addition to verbal and emotional abuse.
Very much so, and it's all just interconnected. I mean, these people, like obviously they were put through some hectic crimes, but it all stemmed from exactly the same place. And a lot of us, the women especially, wouldn't have been there in the first place had they had normal families, had they been, had been given the tools to deal with what life threw at them. They wouldn't have been there in the first place. And then to top it all off, they never had the support of these people either, because they're the ones who put them there in the first place. So that sort of became really, really apparent. And that was the case, right, let's do something about this.
Wow. So in what you've lived through and witnessed and all of these people that you've helped in your past, you've really noticed that the source of the pain that those women in court experienced is really the same source as what your emotional trauma clients have experienced.
Correct. It all comes from exactly the same place. If all these poor women and and my clients as well, had we sort of had the luck of the draw to be born into normal families, and half of these things wouldn't happen. We would have the tools to deal with life's inevitabilities. We would have had the coping strategies. We would have seen red flags. And if something happened, we would have been given the support and the emotional support, legal support, things like that from our own families. And I just saw that in both these cases, from emotional trauma to full-on physical abuse to all sorts of crimes, the root was exactly the same. Yeah.
Wow, that is so insightful, and you have such a unique perspective on these subjects.
Thank you.
So, if I may, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your personal story. I know many people in our Facebook community that you are a part of and our podcast guests have kind of described waking up to trauma and realizing, oh, wait a minute, my family is messed up and that wasn't okay, Did you also have a kind of waking up experience?
I don't know. I think it was quite gradual, the grooming and the brainwashing, and my family in particular is extraordinarily enmeshed. So it was definitely all that kind of thing of the magical family, the special family, things like that. So where I like to start is that, it's terms like abuse, or even narcissism or toxic or things like that, is not an easy thing to sort of, accept right off the bat like that. That's why it's difficult to join these groups, because you normalize so much. You think that, no, I mean, every family goes through this. It's not so bad. Let's try set another boundary, or, let's come up with another solution or something like that. And then it really just, it sort of snowballs into that. So what you can sort of, where I came from is that, okay, can we at least admit that this is not normal? We don't have to say things like abuse or narcissism or any of that kind of thing just yet, but can we at least sort of come to that sort of a point where we know this isn't normal? And then, and I decided, okay, I'm going to sit my parents down and we're going to have one more. I don't know, same thing with most people who would be listening to this. You try and you try and you try thousands and thousands of times. Letters, emails, sit downs, interventions, whatever the case may be. And in my case, my parents were trying to break up my marriage and take my child. They had their sights set on my child, the new pliable, shiny version of a daughter that they can control. And all it had become was damage control all the time. I was no longer raising my child. I was doing damage control, basically. So I decided, okay, let's have a bit of a meeting, sat down and said, right, I've got to put these boundaries here. The first thing is that you cannot keep telling my child that my husband and I are abusive. Okay, you can't keep doing that. So let's get to the bottom of it. Why do you think that my husband and I are abusing this child? And let's get to the bottom of it. And that's really, really got to stop. And then the risky behavior, things like driving with her in the car while they were drunk. Or throwing into the swimming pool, lots and lots of alcohol involved. It was just two things that I asked them to please stop doing. You've got to stop telling my child that she has abusive parents, and you've got to stop putting her in risky situations. Those are the only two things I need from you guys. I'm not going to revisit any trauma. By this time, I had not known at all what no contact was or what a narcissist was. I have the Psychology 101, version of what narcissism is, but I had absolutely no idea that this was actually happening. And can I swear?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Fuck yes.
Oh, good. The show that came after that was just, it was so shocking. Both my parents flew into what I now know as a narcissistic rage, and basically all the truth came out of exactly what they thought of me and my husband and how we were running our lives. And of course, it all comes out. They attack your character. They attack anything that you can possibly think of, every decision, every choice. They will bring up, what bad things you did as a teenager, blah, 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 blah. And it was very, very apparent in the shit show that happened that afternoon that not only was this not going to be fixed, it was also never, ever going to get any better. And I said to my parents, look, we've got to get to a stage where you understand where I'm coming from. And they shrieked some more, and they hurled more abuse and, fingers in our faces and freaking out. My husband was with me, and turned around and stormed off. And that was about 6 years ago, and I haven't heard from them since. So that was when I wrote The Hate and Switch. I don't know if you're familiar with that, where it's a case of, I didn't technically go no contact with my family. They went no contact with me, but that's not the story they tell, is it? And that's basically where sort of no contact started, and I was so shocked. And then decided, okay, let me go and find, I'm going to need some therapy. I need some therapy for this. This is insane. I mean, you're in a state of absolute shock, the hypervigilance and the feeling so sick, and the cortisol, the adrenaline, and thought, okay, let me go and find a therapist. And I don't know about the States, but in South Africa, therapy is very much based on family therapy. So the premise is that you bring the whole family into the doctor's office, and you all sit and you iron out your differences. And I thought, no. This is the last thing I want to do. I need to find someone who's going to help me through this. And realized very, very quickly that any therapist in South Africa was not clued up on what narcissism was, what sociopathy was. Sadism also came into it. And I went to Facebook and saw, wow, there's hundreds of thousands of women like me looking for the same answers that they are. And then realized what no contact was. And I hadn't realized that I'd got no contact. I didn't even have a definition for it. And then just went and researched, rampaged, basically everything I could find on narcissism, toxic family, sociopathy, the dark triad, sort of deep dive into all of that. And then realized sort of it hits you all at once that, okay, we've established that things aren't normal. Now we've established that things are really messed up, and there are labels for these things. And then as soon as I thought, okay, applying a label to these things, that sort of made it a lot easier. And then as I went through, I also joined the Facebook groups, chatted with the other people, and then mapped out my own recovery as I went. And then one day decided, okay, cool, let's start to practice, because obviously people need people that understand that sitting down with your family and ironing out your differences is not therapy for toxic families. So, and that's how it basically started.
That is so awesome that you're obviously a trailblazer. You were in this situation. You looked for help, you asked for help, help was not available to you, and you essentially created your own help and trauma recovery systems and knowledge base to give other people the power to deal with all these fucked up situations.
I hope so. I really hope so, because I tend to feel better about things. I deal better with things when I'm able to assign meaning to it. And especially what my little family, my husband, my child, and myself had gone through just in the years leading up to no contact, because obviously those are the worst. It just seemed so meaningless to me to put a perfectly happy, thriving family through such toxic abuse for no reason. I feel like I do better with assigning meaning. So decided, okay, well, counseling will at least then give that kind of meaning, that if I can do this for myself, I can do it for other people, and then this won't be meaningless.
Oh, that's so inspiring. And I'm so glad that you did do all of that research, go down all those rabbit holes, look beyond South Africa for all these resources, and that you then started to notice all of these people who really needed help with these things. It's amazing that you've done that and that you've turned it into a profession. Yeah,
Thank you so much.
absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's huge taboo here. South Africa is still terribly, terribly conservative, terribly, terribly sort of like family orientated, very duty bound. We and also terribly sort of religious as well in all our cultures, very, very religious. Honor thy mother and thy father. There's no such thing as walking away from a family. And it's not just walking away from a family that's so painful and so difficult. It's the rest of society, the rest of South Africa going, how could you do this? And they've got the backup from the rest of society, churches, institutions, all these kinds of things that just nobody understands this. So I mean, you are a pariah. If you even think of doing such a thing, that families are supposed to do whatever they want to, and you as the child or the daughter, especially the oldest daughter, seems to take a lot of flack, more flack than usual, but very duty honor bound to a family. So that second wave of trauma that I talk about, that sort of comes in with that as well.
Mm-hmm. So that context is really interesting, the culture in South Africa and those familial expectations that are kind of woven into your society.
Yeah.
I sort of tend to refer to that as tribal wiring. So it's
Right,
like
right.
the
Yeah,
wiring within your
yeah.
family context
I
and
like that.
the
Tribal wiring.
larger,
That's
you know,
excellent. Yeah, yeah,
society, and the cultural wiring and expectations.
yeah.
And I love, um, when in my deep dive and going down my rabbit holes, I think it really started to click with me when I started to read psychology books and realizing that that fear of dishonoring your family
Yeah.
actually goes back to when we were all cave women and cavemen.
100%.
And we
Yes,
were in the
yes,
frozen tundra. And if you didn't do what the family unit needed you to do, you
yes.
could be left out in the snow without
Exactly.
food and you would
Exactly. We're
die.
biologically wired to need our families, to need that connection, literally for survival. Our families, especially our primary caregivers, we rely on them 100%, especially for the first few years of our life, for warmth, for shelter, for nourishment, and any kind of abandonment or rejection. In any mammal, to be honest, is a massive, massive threat. And we are biologically wired to now crave that kind of connection, and do basically exactly what you said. Anything to sort of keep that connection going, as traumatic as it might be, because our sort of our caveman brains are saying to us, if we don't, you're going to die. So I love that you just said that. Yeah.
So, so much has changed in the context of our modern society and the fact that you can just apply for a visa, get on a plane, and move to a different country. Our modern life is so different, and yet we're still living out those
Yeah.
caveman fears,
Yes,
right?
definitely, definitely. Yeah. No, evolutionary psychology is fascinating. And I mean, it's got to start there. It has to. We haven't actually evolved that much, from the caveman brain. We really haven't. And also now, and the village system, we don't have that either. In the cave, this would have been maybe easier to get through, because in the sort of the village system, everybody's watching everybody else, and that there's leaders and there's wise people to keep everybody in check. And we don't have that anymore. We live in our houses. We fortress ourselves, especially South Africa. It's a very dangerous country. We all live behind bars and electric fencing and razor wire, and there's no such thing as a community where people are watching and listening and learning and watching other people's kids and going, oh, what's going on here? There's no accountability. It's very easy to hide what goes on behind closed doors, without that sort of village sort of community system anymore.
Mm.
Mm.
So in a way, you're sort of conditioned, encouraged, and forced to be barricaded a little bit in South
Yeah,
Africa. And
very
I'm
much
so
so.
glad that you are now in a profession that demands for you to be on the internet
Yeah,
and on social media platforms. And I'm sure you're connecting with people from all over the place.
I am. It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. I mean, it's just to talk to you. I mean, when you said North Carolina, oh my goodness, I've always wanted to go there. Yes, it's fantastic. It's wonderful how the internet gives us the sort of opportunity and ability to reach out as far as we like.
Yeah, well, 100%. I'm so glad that that we're getting to connect and hearing about your life in South Africa and just how therapy is different. Here in the States, I think it's therapy is a little bit like screaming into a pillow. It's like
Really?
you can have as much of it as you want, but you're really not encouraged to scream outside of the pillow. Like
Ah,
you can
okay,
go into
okay.
a therapy office and you can talk about your mother and your father and your siblings and all the people who drive you crazy and rub you the wrong way. But you're really sort of deconditioned and discouraged from talking about your trauma outside of a therapist's office.
Wow.
And you know, in my own trauma recovery journey, I went to therapy for 3 or 4 years and I said, I need more.
Yeah, yeah,
I need
yeah,
more than
yeah.
just this one person to talk to.
Yes, yes, definitely. And also, like, were you given any kind of practical advice or like things to exercises? I mean, I'm always giving my I give homework. Were you given things like that, or was it literally as
Yes.
in get it out? Somebody was listening, and that was it.
A little bit of both.
Okay.
So my trauma therapist is a behavioral therapist.
Yeah.
So she's not focused on pouring salt in the old wounds.
Yeah.
We did a little bit of that, but it's really okay, how does this relate to your current relationships? How is this
Mm,
affecting your life today? How is this
okay.
affecting the way that you make decisions right now?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
find that's so much more progressive and
Yeah.
relevant than let's sit in the room together and explore all of your pain points from 30 years ago. And
Wow.
that's
Yeah.
it.
It's gonna take a while.
And it's going to really hurt also.
A lot. Yes. Did you go to therapy before or after no contact?
So I went no contact with my father almost 12 years ago. And then it was many, many years before I started therapy. So I started therapy about 5 years ago.
Okay.
At the time, not being in therapy, not knowing anything about mental health, not knowing anything about trauma, it felt like I was cutting my arm off with a machete. It was like I'm cutting off a part of my body and I'm gonna have to just walk around like this and be weird and disfigured for the rest of my life.
Mm,
Because when you're in your 20s, like people don't really talk about that sort of thing. And when you don't have a toolbox of a therapist and, neuro-linguistic programming and all the tools that we have now, being a little bit older and wiser and also living in a more modern society,
mm.
I think it's really confusing to deal with all
Yeah.
those things. And so at that time, it was really, really an intuitive, instinctive decision that I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't have
Mm.
words for the emotions that I was feeling, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think yeah, but that's also an underlying sort of factor with this. Growing up in a toxic family, you don't have words for your feelings because they were always discouraged, if not outwardly like pounded out of you. I mean, grown adults now coming through all this pain and all this trauma and have no way to talk about it because they actually have no idea how to label the feelings that they're having, because they've sort of been repressed for such a long time or blocked out entirely, because they were so sort of actively discouraged. So, geez, like, my heart goes out to you.
Well, thank you for that. I think a lot of people can relate to the way that you and I have felt towards our parents. And I know that you are an expert in different types of emotional toxicity. So I want to talk about that a little bit.
Mm.
Of for people who are just learning that vocabulary and starting to assign words to their feelings, and just kind of scratching the surface of their Pandora's box. What is the difference between say an emotionally toxic parent and a narcissist specifically? Because we throw these words around,
We do.
and we all have different levels of understanding of that.
Yeah, yeah. I always just want to start up with, when saying things like this, is that it doesn't matter. The diagnosis doesn't matter. The label doesn't matter. The bottom line is that if you are being made to feel scared and miserable and hurt by anybody, let alone someone who is supposed to do the opposite of that, it's abuse. And it isn't normal, and you don't deserve to be treated like that. We can bandy around lots and lots of labels and terms and diagnoses and whatever, but it's not going to change anything. And I don't like it when people focus far too much on the diagnosis instead of how it makes you feel. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what we call these people, or what triad they fall under, or what cluster B, or whatever. It doesn't matter. What matters is how you feel, how you were treated, and how you're going to now deal with it, how you want to live the rest of your life. On top of that, narcissism is an observation. It's not even a diagnosis. It's an observation. And even the most gifted psychotherapists, psychologists, all they have to go on is observing somebody's behavior and then making an albeit educated guess. But it is a series of observations, and no one has seen and observed more toxicity and narcissism and all that kind of thing than the victim has, or the survivor has. And it's also, and people think they're going to be
I'm
cross
going
with
to
me for
stop
saying
you
this,
right
but it's
there.
also.
So
Mhm.
what you said is tremendously important, that the survivor has observed more toxicity than anyone else. So I want to expand upon that and invite you to dig further into that. When you are sitting in front of a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a therapist, in what way can you attach to yourself first and trust yourself first, despite what the medical professional is saying?
Yes, yes. First of all, ditch all the labels, ditch the diagnoses, ditch the labels, ditch all of that. It's not going to make any difference. It's not going to change anything. It's not going to heal you. It's not going to make you feel better. Having labels for things is awesome, because that means we can go and do a bit of research and all that. But I think the first thing to keep in your mind is, ditch the labels, and to keep in the back of your mind all the time that no one is more of an expert on your life than you are. The psychiatrists, therapists, whatever. I mean, lots of them can be studied in narcissism and the dark triad and all that kind of thing. But the bottom line is, no one is more of an expert in your life than you are. And always, always, always remember that. You can tell your story and you can, but anything that's sort of raising red flags that you are not being understood, walk out, go find somebody that's a better fit. Make sure that you know that you're with somebody who knows exactly what they're talking about, that's not going to re-traumatize you by adding labels. Okay, my problem with this is that the moment you add a syndrome or a disease or disorder, those three little words, to anything, it kind of strips you of a lot of power as to how much of an expert you are in your own life. And the problem with labels like that as well is that it almost introduces a form of condoning, almost as if they have a disorder so they can't help it. The last thing a survivor needs to hear is that this person is a product of their disease or their disorder or their syndrome, and they couldn't help it. That is absolute bullshit. Everyone can help it. There are very, very few disorders that people can't help. The dark triad, narcissism, things like that is not something, doesn't fall under the category. So my advice would bear in mind, please, you are the experts on your own life.
Oh, I love what you've said there. And that's so important. And I think when we are embarking on our trauma recovery journey, we're in such a vulnerable space that it's easy to forget that the person with all the fancy degrees on the wall, the medical doctor who's prescribing your anti-anxiety medicine, that you always know more about yourself than that person does.
100%, 100%, definitely. And these are jobs. Therapists it's just a job like any other job. You get people that are very good at their jobs, and you get people that are absolutely crap at their jobs. And therapists and psychologists and counselors and whatever on absolutely no different. You get therapists and counselors or whatever, they treat this like a vocation, that they really will do the work, that they really do care, and then you get doctors who just hand out anxiety meds and go, there, you're cured. And you've got to find that sort of that person that really, really gives a shit, that really is going to do the work with you and go through this journey with you and really listen to you. Not just give you a bunch of exercises to do or follow sort of a set program. Everybody is different. Everybody's trauma is different. Everybody's story is different. So you need someone as unique as you are into your story. It's not a paint by numbers kind of therapy. It's so much more than that.
So it sounds like what you're saying is, just focus on finding the person who makes you feel good and safe and supported.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
Whatever that feeling is, whether you can
Yeah.
explain it or not. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it is, because you say it makes you feel safe and supported, definitely. But this kind of recovery isn't something that you always feel safe doing. It is uncomfortable. The whole point in recovery from especially narcissistic abuse is coming out of the delusions that you've been put in, that you've been brainwashed to believe. So that is you don't feel very safe. You should feel safe talking about it, that this person is not going to use this information against you, or use it to hurt you later, definitely. So yeah, a rapport, first of all, very, very, very important. Feeling safe, feeling secure, feeling heard, feeling validated. Not just sort of rattled off, and therapists these days, a lot of them are just revolving doors of clients. I mean, you get therapists that have, they have like 25-minute sessions at, $600 an hour. And I mean, no one's going to get to the heart of anything there. I think everybody on some level knows if a person really cares, and just sort of go with your gut. The problem with being raised like this is that your instincts have been beaten out of you, and to do your instinct work is very, very important. Know that your instincts are correct. Usually, go with your gut. Listen to your body. If your shoulders are tension up, if your heart is racing, if you're breathing heavily, then this is a person that doesn't feel safe. Then that person's not safe.
Oh, that is invaluable advice. And thank you so much for articulating those things. I want to ask you, I think a burning question that a lot of people have in this space around childhood trauma is, people struggle with knowing when it's time to go no contact, knowing when it's time to stop trying and stop attempting to be a certain way, behave a certain way, set certain boundaries. So I would love to hear what you have to say about the difference between distancing and going no contact.
Okay. I think, with no contact, if you are considering going no contact, it was time long ago to go no contact. No one sits and goes, when is a good time to go no contact? If you're even considering going no contact, that is huge. That is drastic. It really is drastic. I think people don't understand how drastic this is. That, like we chatted about, the biological need for connection. I mean, it's not only emotional and all sorts of things. And obviously, you've got, by the time you go no contact, you've usually got 30, 40 years under your belt. And deeper interconnections as well. You've got siblings, you've got nieces and nephews, there are children involved, grandchildren, things like that. So this is really serious. If you've now just even considering no contact, it was long ago. Get out of there. There's lots and lots of things that everybody tries, but I think everybody that knows, who has gone no contact, low contact is probably the last thing you try before you go full on no contact, because it will depend on how your family reacts to the low contact. I believe that the dysfunction is basically relevant or related, to the level of dysfunction by their reaction. So if you now say, okay, mom, dad, we can't come over this weekend. I will see you next month. And from then on, we'll do like a monthly visit. And your family goes, yeah, okay, cool. That sounds great. Well, then awesome. But if your family freaks out and starts freaking out about your boundaries or your rules or anything like that, now you have serious dysfunction. So there are things that you can try. I think you can, I mean, the best way really to establish whether you're going to have a complete shit show or not is to set a boundary and to see how your family then reacts to it. Set a reasonable boundary, as in a reasonable boundary. Please do not leave my child unattended in the car. Reasonable boundary. In my country, that's illegal. You're not even allowed to do that by law. And if you now tell your toxic family, please don't do this, and they have an absolute fuck fit and they are screaming obscenities and carrying on for themselves, you've got a very, very serious problem. And now you've gone from sort of keeping sort of toxic dynamic alive by just surviving it to knowing you have to really get the hell out of there. And I think, I don't know if you tried low contact first and saw how that worked. Did it work? Clearly not. No. But at least afterwards, you can say to yourself, I literally tried everything. And it's not because you should try everything, because these things are dead in the water. Nothing's going to come right. Nothing is going to change. You should not feel guilty about walking away from this. But the thing is, the guilt, the toxic shame is in us all the time. And because we're groomed, a lot of us, to be the family fixers and to smooth things over and to make sure that the family doesn't completely fall apart. By the time no contact or low contact comes along, you feel wretched for doing it because it's your job to keep the family together. So now by leaving, or at least you're sort of implementing boundaries or low contact, you feel like an absolute shit. But at least afterwards, you can sort of assuage that guilt by saying, I tried everything. It didn't work. And now my only option is no contact. I mean, we don't go no contact because we feel like it. We go no contact to survive. And it literally is our only option.
Oh man, thank you for all that. I want to mirror back and reiterate a couple points that you made that I think are really powerful. When you said, set a boundary and then gauge the reaction. We see so much of that in our private group, and I'm sure you see so much of that in your work of people just absolutely freaking out and throwing a temper tantrum when you set a new boundary that is perfectly reasonable. It says, Mom, I have work stuff going on, or I have to do this thing for the kids, or I already had plans this weekend. All of these parents who are trying to pull us back in, by the neck, assuming that we still have our chain around our necks and that they can just pull on it whenever they want to. And that the moment that we resist and we don't allow them to just jerk us around, that they just absolutely become completely dysregulated, aggressive, attacking, name calling, criticism, judgment, reaction, punishment, all of the things that happen. So I think it's really, really wise and insightful for you to invite others to set a boundary and then to see what the reaction is on the other end.
Yeah, definitely. I would just caution people with this as well, that, okay, if you set a boundary and you get that sort of narcissistic rage pushback, that really shocking, that just all the gloves come off, they employ like a scorched earth policy about it. It's a case of what they're going through is basically hurling everything that they can possibly have. And they have a really small arsenal, actually. So anything that they throw at you will be everything. And as terrifying as it is, at least then you know where you stand. At least now you know that's exactly what they're going to do. This is never going to change, and it's always going to be like that, and it's going to get worse. But there's a second reaction that I would actually think is far scarier, is that you set a boundary, and your parent, for instance, says, "Okay, fine, you have a point," and accepts the boundary. And now you think, well, this is fucking wonderful. I mean, now I have a family. We can go forward. We can be happy. We can be normal. And it's usually 3 weeks. I'm not sure why it's 3 weeks, but 3 weeks is usually, and every time I've seen this, 3 weeks is the absolute maximum that the narcissist or the toxic parents or whatever can keep this sort of facade going. But let me tell you, in those 3 weeks, they have gone behind your back and they have figured out the most insidious ways to keep things exactly as they are, to make them worse behind your back. And if you've got children and they are spending lots and lots of time with their grandparents, and you have said something like your boundary is, please don't give my child dairy, she's allergic to it. I'm telling you, the first thing they will do is go and buy that child an ice cream and make her sick. And this is what we can't really wrap our heads around, is because boundaries are supposed to be beneficial to everybody. It's supposed to make the family happier and healthier. So we think, well, this is great. It's to the benefit of all involved. So why wouldn't you follow the boundary? And then we kind of sort of, we do this reverse projection where we think, well, if somebody came to me with a good suggestion as to how we can reinforce the relationship and make this better going forward, then of course I would do it. And you just then assume that your family is doing it. Meanwhile, behind your back, they are going out of their way to do exact opposite of what you needed them to do. Because the thing is, this is about control. Our goals are completely different. We want healthy families and they want control. And the only way that they can control is through all these toxic, insidious, awful methods, gaslighting, lying, whatever. We can get into it. But and if it's happening behind your back, especially if there's children involved, watch out. Seriously, watch out. Because that'll be the case of like the selective amnesia. Mom, I told you not to give my daughter dairy. Oh, what did you mean? I totally forgot about it. Oh, shit, sorry. That kind of thing. That shit is happening behind your back and you need to keep an eye on
it. Okay. So that's really important. And that's a much deeper, I think, often unseen level. And we do hear a lot of stories about that in our community of, parents, trash talking behind your back after you've set a boundary, parents, behaving a certain way around their grandchildren, parents, withdrawing financial support, parents trying to turn other family members against you after you've set a boundary, right?
Yeah.
So that's a really insightful point of view to mention this kind of behind the scenes ripple effect that can happen.
And they know exactly where they hit you where it hurts. They will find your vulnerabilities. Children being your biggest one, obviously. And then obviously your other family connections. Your family connections are really, really important to you. If you've got a close sibling, that's the person they're going to go after. That's the person that they're going to start collecting allies, collecting people that they want on their side. Spreading rumors about what's really going on behind your closed doors. And I love a lot of projection as well happening there, sort of more confessions than anything else. They will start accusing you of exactly the things that they themselves are guilty of. And it hurts like hell because it's so hypocritical and it's so unnecessary and it's so just out of left field. But yeah, don't be surprised at all if they go for the absolute jugular of what is going to hurt you the most.
And I would say those kind of attacking behaviors, whether they're face-to-face, confrontational, or they're behind the scenes attacking behaviors. I think anytime that a parent is behaving in a way that is clearly malicious and meant to do harm, I think that is the time that you need to start thinking about either distancing greatly or just no contact altogether, because their
100%.
intention becomes clear.
This is it. Exactly. Because you've established the intention, and the intention is never, ever, ever to heal. It is never, ever to recover. It's never to make things better. In this case, the examples you've cited here, I mean, that is absolutely an attack, but it's revenge. This is not the behavior of people who want to reconcile. This is not the behavior of people who want to get healthier or get better. This is the behavior of people who want revenge. And the moment you see that is the moment that you need to make yourself safe and your family safe as quickly as you can.
Well, Kirsten Roberts, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. You are so wise, insightful, intelligent, and bold in the work that you do. And I am honored to know you as a leader in this movement of breaking the cycle of silence.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such a lovely thing to say, and I'm so, so happy to have met you. I'm really, really honored. It was really lovely, and I hope we speak again.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Kirsten.
Such
And
a pleasure.
for all of those who are listening today, we will have a link to Kirsten's website so you can learn more about her and her trauma work and how she works with clients all over the world to help heal those emotional trauma wounds.